Chapter 8. We hop a freight train in Tennessee, and once we are settled, Six tells us about her and Katerina being captured while they were in upstate New York, just a month after narrowly escaping the Mogadorians in West Texas. This second time around, after botching the first attempt, the Mogadorians had planned well, and when they stormed the room, they totaled more than 30 in number. Six and Katerina had been able to take a few down, but they were quickly bound, gagged, and drugged. When Six woke up, having no idea how much time had passed, she was alone in a cell in a hollowed-out mountain. She didn't discover she was in West Virginia until some time later. Six learned the Mogadorians had been trailing them the entire time, observing, hoping the two might lead them to the others, because, in Six's words, why kill one when the others might be near? I shift uneasily when she says this. Maybe she is still being followed and they are waiting for the perfect time to kill us. They had bugged our car when we were eating in the diner in Texas, and it never once occurred to either of us to check, she says, and then gives herself over to a long silence. Aside from an iron door containing a sliding hatch in its center for food to be delivered through, her tiny cell was made entirely of rock, measuring 8 feet on each side. She had no bed or toilet, and the cell was pitch black. The first 2 days passed in total darkness and silence, without food or water, though she never felt hungry or thirsty, which, she said she later learned, was due to the charm's effect, and she had started to believe she'd been forgotten. But her luck hadn't been that good, and on the 3rd day they came for her. When they opened the door, I was huddled in the far corner. They threw a bucket of cold water on me, picked me up, blindfolded me, and pulled me away. After being dragged down a tunnel, they'd let her walk on her own while surrounded by 10 or so Mogs. She could see nothing, but heard plenty, screams and cries from other prisoners for who knows what reasons. When he heard this, Sam perked up and seemed about to interrupt and ask questions, but said nothing. The roars of beasts locked away in their own cells, and metallic clanking. And then she had been thrust in a room, had her wrists chained to a wall, and been gagged. They dripped off her blindfold, and when her eyes finally adjusted, she saw Katerina on the opposite wall, also chained and gagged and looking far worse than Six felt. And then he finally entered, a Mogadorian who looked no different from someone you're likely to pass on the street. He was small, had hairy arms and a thick mustache. Almost all of them had mustaches, as though they had learned to blend in by watching movies from the early 80s. He wore a white shirt, and the top button was undone, and for some reason my eyes focused on the thick tuft of black hair poking out. I looked into his dark eyes, and he smiled at me in a way that told me he was looking forward to doing what he was about to do, and I started to cry. I slid down the wall until I dangled from the shackles around my wrists, watching through my tears as he pulled razor blades, knives, pliers, and a drill from the desk they had in the center of the room. When the Mogadorian had finished removing over 20 instruments, he'd gone to Six and stood inches from her face so that she could smell his sour breath. "Do you see all of these?" he'd asked. She didn't respond. "I intend to use each and every one of them on you and your Sapan, unless you truthfully answer every question I ask. If you don't, I assure you that both of you will wish you were dead." He picked one up, a thin razor blade with a rubber-coated handle, and caressed the side of Six's face with it. "I've been hunting you kids for a very long time," he'd said. "We've killed 2 of you, and now we have one right here, whatever number you are. As you might imagine, I hope you are number 3. Six had made no response, pushing herself against the wall as though she might disappear into it. The Mogadorian grinned, the flat end of the razor still touching her face. Then he twisted it so the blade pressed against her cheek, and while looking deep into her eyes, he jerked the razor down and made a long, thin gash along her face. Or rather he tried to, but it had been his own face that was slit open. Blood instantly poured down his cheek and he screamed in pain and anger, kicking the desk over, sending all of his tools flying, and he stormed from the room. Six and Katerina had been dragged back to their cells, kept in darkness another 2 days before finding themselves again gagged and chained to the walls of the room. Sitting on the desk with his cheek bandaged sat the same Mog, looking far less certain of himself than he had before. He jumped from the desk and removed Six's gag, grabbed the same razor he had tried cutting her with, and held it up in front of her face, twisting it so that the light glimmered along the blade. "I don't know what number you are." For a second she'd thought he would try to cut her again, but he turned and crossed the room to Katerina instead. He stood at her side while looking at Six, and then he touched the blade to Katerina's arm. "But you're going to tell me right now?" "No." Six had screamed. And then very slowly the Mogadorian made an incision down Katerina's arm just to be certain he could. His grin widened, and beside the original cut he made another, this one deeper than the first. Katerina groaned in pain while the blood ran down her arm. "I can do this all day. Do you understand me? You're going to tell me everything I want to know, starting with what number are you?" Six had closed her eyes. When she reopened them he was at the desk, turning over a dagger that changed colors with movement. He'd held it up, wanting Six to see the blade twist and glow as it came to life. Six could feel its hunger, its desperation for blood. "Now, your number? 4? 7? Are you lucky enough to be number 9? Katerina had shaken her head in an attempt to keep Six quiet, and Six knew that no amount of torture would ever cause her serpent to talk. But she also knew she preferred death to seeing Katerina maimed and mutilated. The Mogadorian had gone to Katerina, lifted the dagger so the tip was just over her heart. It jerked in his hand, as though the heart was a magnet pulling it forward. He looked into Six's eyes. "I have all the time in the galaxies for this," he'd said without emotion. "While you are in here with me, we are out there with the rest of you. Don't think anything has stopped us from moving forward because we have you. We know more than you think. But we want to know everything. If you don't want to see her sliced into little pieces, then you better start talking, and fast. And every single word that comes out better be true. I will know if you're lying." Six had told him everything she remembered about leaving Lorien and the trip here, the chests, where they'd been hiding. She talked so fast that most of it came out jumbled. Six told him she was number 8, not wanting to tell him the whole truth, and there was something about the desperation in her voice that caused him to believe it. "You really are weak, aren't you? Your relatives on Lorien, as easy as they fell, at least they were fighters. At least they had some bravery and dignity. But you," he'd said, and shook his head as if disappointed. "You have nothing, number 8. And then he's jammed the knife forward, through Katerina's heart. All Six could do was scream. Their eyes had met for a single second before Katerina drifted away, her mouth still gagged, slowly sliding down the wall until the chain had run out of slack and she hung limply by her wrists as the light drained from her eyes. "They were going to kill her anyway," Six says softly. "Telling them what I did, at least I spared her from horrible torture, as if there's any comfort in that." Six wraps her arms around her knees and stares at some abstract point out the window of the train. "Of course there's comfort in that," I offer, wishing I were brave enough to stand and wrap my arms around her. To my surprise, Sam is that brave. He stands, and makes his way over to her. He doesn't say a word when he sits down next to her, instead opening his arms. Six buries her face in Sam's shoulder and cries. She eventually pulls back and wipes her cheeks. When Katerina was dead, they tried everything, and I mean everything, They could to kill me: electrocution, drowning, explosives. They injected me with cyanide, which did nothing. I didn't even feel the needle going into my arm. They threw me in a chamber filled with poisonous gas, and it was like the air inside was the freshest I'd ever breathed. The Mogadorian who pushed the button on the other side of the door, though, he was dead within seconds. 6 takes another swipe at her cheek with the back of her hand. It's funny, you know, that I think I killed more Mogadorians when I was captured than I did at the school in Ohio. They finally threw me in another cell, and I think they'd planned on keeping me there until they killed 3 through 7. I love that you told them you were number 8, Sam says. I feel bad that I did it now. It's like I tarnished Katerina's legacy, or the real number 8's. Sam places his hands on both her shoulders. No way, 6. How long were you in there? I ask. 185 days, I think. My mouth drops open. Over half a year locked away, completely and utterly alone, waiting to be killed. I'm so sorry, 6. I was just waiting and praying for my legacies to finally develop so I could get the hell out of there. And then one day, the first one finally did. It was after breakfast. I looked down and my left hand just wasn't there. Of course, I freaked out, but then I realized I could still feel my hand. I tried to pick up my spoon, and sure enough, I could. And that's when I understood what was happening, and invisibility was the thing I needed in order to escape. How it started for 6 wasn't all that different from how it had started for me, when my hand began to glow in the middle of my first class at Paradise High. 2 days later 6 had been able to make herself completely invisible, and when dinner rolled around that day, and the slot on the door was slid open and her meal pushed through, the Mogadorian guard saw an empty cell. He'd looked wildly around and then hit an alarm that sent a piercing wail through the cave. The iron door had been flung open and 4 Mogs charged in. While they stood there, dumbfounded as to how she'd escaped, she slid by and rushed out the door and down the tunnel, seeing the cave for the very first time. It had been a massive labyrinthine network of long, interconnected tunnels that were dark and drafty. There were cameras everywhere. She'd passed thick glass windows revealing chambers that looked like scientific labs, clean and brightly lit. The Mogadorians inside had worn white plastic suits and goggles, but she'd raced by so swiftly she couldn't tell what they were doing. A sprawling room housed 1,000 or so computer screens with a Mogadorian sitting in front of each, and 6 assumed they were looking for signs of us. Just like Henri, I thought. One tunnel was lined with heavy steel doors she had been sure held other prisoners. But she sped on, knowing her legacy was far from developed and terrified she wouldn't stay invisible for very long. The siren had continued to wail. And then she reached the heart of the mountain, a great, cavernous hall a half-mile wide and so dark and murky she could hardly see to its other side. The air had been stifling and 6 was already sweating. The walls and ceiling were lined with huge wooden trellises to keep the cave from collapsing, and narrow ledges chiseled into the rock face connected the tunnels dotting the dark walls. Above her, several long arches had been carved from the mountain itself to bridge the great divide from one side to the other. She had pressed herself against a rocky crag, her eyes darting back and forth for a way out. The number of passageways had been endless. She'd stood there overwhelmed, her eyes sweeping across the hollow darkness, seeing nothing at all that looked promising. But then she did, far across the ravine, a pale pinprick of natural light at the end of a wider tunnel. Just before she climbed the wooden trellis to reach the stone bridge that led to it, something else caught her eye, the Mogadorian who had killed Katerina. She couldn't let him get away. She followed him. He entered the room where he had killed Katerina. I went straight to his desk and took the sharpest razor I saw, then grabbed him from behind and slit his throat. And as I watched the blood gush and spread across the floor, followed by him bursting into ash, I found myself wishing that it would have been possible to kill him a little more slowly. Or to kill him again. "What did you do when you finally got out?" I ask. "I hiked up the opposite mountain, and when I got up there I stared down at the cave for an hour, trying to remember every little detail I could. Once I was satisfied with that, I took note of everything I passed on the 5-mile run to the nearest road, and from there I jumped on the back of a slow pickup truck. When it stopped a few miles down the road to get gas, I stole his map, a notepad, and a couple of pens from the cab. Oh, and a bag of potato chips." "Nice. What kind of chips?" Sam asks. "Dude," I say. "What?" "They were barbecue, Sam. I marked the cave's location on the map I showed you guys back at the motel, and in the notepad I drew a diagram of everything I remembered, like a chart that would lead whoever read it straight to its entrance." I kind of panicked and hid the diagram not far from the town but kept the map. Then I stole a car and drove straight to Arkansas, but of course by then my chest had long since been taken. "I'm so sorry, 6. "Me, too," she says. "But they can't open it without me anyway. Maybe I'll get it back someday." "At least we still have mine," I reply. "You should open it soon," she says, and I know she's right. I should have opened it already. Whatever's in that chest, whatever secrets it holds, Henri had wanted me to know them. The secrets. The chest. He had said as much in his final breaths. I feel stupid for having put it off this long, but whatever's in the chest, I have a feeling it's going to set the 4 of us on a long, uphill journey. "I will," I say. "Let's just get off this train and find a safe place first." Chapter 9. I'm the first one out of bed when the morning bell rings. I always am. It's not necessarily because I'm a morning person but because I prefer being in and out of the bathroom before anyone else. I rush through making my bed, which I've gotten very good at over time. The key is getting the sheet, blanket, and comforter tucked deeply in at the foot. From there it's just a matter of pulling the rest to the head, tucking the sides, and adding pillows to give it that clean, a quarter could be bounced off it finish. By the time I'm done, across the room in the bed nearest to the door, Ella, the girl who arrived on Sunday, is the only other one up. Like the previous 2 mornings, she's trying to emulate the way I make my bed, though she's struggling with it. Her problem is that she's trying to work from the top down instead of the bottom up. While Sister Catherine has been lenient with Ella, her rotation ends today and Sister Dora's week-long shift begins tonight. I know she won't allow Ella to skimp on perfection, regardless of how new she is or what she's going through. "Would you like help?" I ask, crossing the room. She looks at me with sad eyes. I can see she doesn't care about the bed. I imagine she doesn't care about much of anything right now, and I can't blame her, given the death of her parents. I'd like to tell her not to worry, that unlike those of us who are lifers, she'll be out of this place within the month, 2 at the most. But what consolation can that be to her now? I bend down at the foot of the bed and pull the sheet and blanket until there's enough to tuck them both beneath the mattress, then I stretch her comforter over them both. "Want to grab that side?" I ask, nodding to the left of the bed while I go to the right. Together we give the whole bed the same tight, clean look as my own. "Perfect," I say. "Thank you," she replies in her soft, timid voice. I look down into her big brown eyes and can't help but like her and feel some need to look after her. "I'm sorry to hear about your parents," I say. Ella looks away. I think I've overstepped my boundaries, but then she offers me a slight smile. "Thank you. I miss them a lot. I'm sure they miss you, too." We leave the room together, and I notice she walks on the balls of her feet so as not to make a sound. At the bathroom sink, Ella grips her toothbrush near the top, almost touching the bristles with her small fingers, making the toothbrush appear larger than it really is. When I catch her staring at me in the mirror, I grin. She grins back, showing 2 rows of tiny teeth. Toothpaste pours from her mouth and runs down her arm, dripping from her elbow. I watch it, thinking the S pattern it creates is familiar, and I let my mind wander. A hot summer day in June. Clouds drift in the blue sky. Cool waters ripple in the sun. The fresh air carries hints of pine. I breathe it in and let the stress of Santa Teresa melt away into nothingness. Though I believe my second legacy developed shortly after the first, I didn't discover it until almost a full year later. It was an accident I discovered it at all, which makes me wonder if I have other legacies waiting to be uncovered. Every year when school lets out for summer, to reward those of us who have been what the sisters deem good, a 4-day trip to a nearby mountain camp is organized. I've always loved the trip for the same reason I love the cave that sits hidden in the opposite direction. It's an escape, a rare opportunity to spend 4 days swimming in the huge lake nestled in the mountains, or a chance to hike, to sleep beneath the stars, to smell the fresh air away from the musty corridors of Santa Teresa. It is, in essence, a chance to act our age. I've even caught some of the sisters laughing and smiling when they think nobody's looking. In the lake, there's a floating dock. I'm a horrible swimmer, and for many summers I just sat and watched from shore while the others laughed and played and did flips off the dock into the water. It took a couple summers of practicing alone in the shallow water, but the summer of my 13th year, I finally learned an imperfect and slow doggy paddle that kept my head above water. It got me to the dock, and that was enough for me. At the dock, the game is to try to push each other off it. Groups team up until they're the only ones left, and then it's every girl for herself. As the biggest and strongest at Santa Teresa, I used to think it'd be an effortless victory for Laghorda, but it rarely is. She's often outsmarted by the smaller, more wily girls, and I don't think anyone has won as many times as a girl named Benita. I didn't want to play La Reina del Muelle, Queen of the Dock. I was content to sit on the side and let my feet dangle in the water, but Benita shoves me hard from behind anyway, sending me headlong into the lake. Play the game or go back to shore, Benita says, flicking her hair over her shoulder. I climb back up and rush straight towards her. I shove her as hard as I can, and she falls backwards and crashes into the lake. I don't hear Laghorda behind me, and suddenly 2 strong hands shove me hard from behind. My feet slip on the wet wood, and the side of my head and shoulders smack against the edge of the dock, clouding my vision with stars. I'm knocked unconscious for a second, and when my eyes open I'm underwater. I see nothing but darkness and instinctively kick upward, flailing my arms to reach the surface. But my head smacks against the bottom of the dock, and I realize there are only a few inches of space between the water and the wooden boards of the dock. I try to tilt my head backwards to put my nose and mouth above the surface, but water instantly laps into my nostrils. I panic, my lungs already burning. I scramble to the left but there's nowhere to go, I'm trapped by the dock's plastic barrels. Water fills my lungs while the absurdity of death by drowning pops into my head. I think of the others, how their ankles are about to be seared. Will they believe that number 3 has been killed, or will they somehow know it's me? Will it burn differently than if I died at the hands of the Mogadorians instead of my own stupidity? My eyes slowly close and I begin to sink. Just as I feel the last stream of bubbles escape my lips, my eyes snap open, and an odd sort of calm sweeps in. My lungs are no longer burning. I'm breathing. The water tickles my lungs, but at the same time satisfies every desperate need I have to breathe. And that's when I know I've discovered my second legacy, the ability to breathe underwater. I've found it only because I was pushed to the brink of death. I don't want to be found just yet by the girls diving into the water looking for me, so I let myself drift down to the deep bottom, the world slowly fading to black until my feet finally sink into the cold mud. I can see through the brown, murky water once my eyes adjust. 10 minutes pass. Then 20. Finally the girls swim away from the dock. I assume the lunch bell's been rung. I wait until I'm absolutely sure they've all left, then I walk slowly along on the lake's bottom towards shore, my feet sinking into the mud as I inch forward. After a while the icy water begins to warm and brighten and the mud segues to rocks and then to sand, and finally my head emerges. I listen to the girls, Lagorda and Benito included, scream and splash towards me in relief. I take inventory of myself on shore, noticing a gash on my shoulder is bleeding, leaving a trail of blood down my arm in the shape of a subtle S. The sisters make me sit the rest of the afternoon at a picnic table under a tree, but I didn't mind. I had another legacy. In the bathroom, Ella catches me watching the toothpaste run down her arm in the mirror. She looks embarrassed, and as she tries to replicate the way I brush my teeth, even more frothy toothpaste pours from her mouth. "You're like a bubble factory," I say with a smile, grabbing a towel to clean her up. We leave the bathroom as the others are arriving, dress quickly in the room and walk out of it as the others are coming in, keeping just ahead of the group, as I prefer to do. We grab our lunches from the cafeteria and head out into the cold morning. I eat my apple on the walk to school. Ella does the same. I'm about 10 minutes early today, which will give me a little time to get on the internet to see if there's anything new about John Smith. The thought of him makes me smile. "Why are you smiling? Do you like school?" Ella asks. I look over at her. The half-eaten apple looks big in her small hand. "It's a nice morning, I guess," I say. "And I have good company today." We walk through town as street vendors set up shop. The snow hasn't melted and is piled along both sides of Call Principal, but the road itself is clear. Up ahead on the right Hector Ricardo's front door opens, and out comes his mother in a wheelchair, being pushed by Hector. She's had Parkinson's disease for a very long time. She's been in a wheelchair for the last 5 years, and she's been unable to speak for the last 3. He positions her in a sliver of sunlight and applies her wheel brakes. While the sun seems to bring her some comfort, Hector slinks away and sits in the shade, dropping his head. "Good morning, Hector," I call out. He lifts his head and squints one eye open. He waves with a shaky hand. "Marina, as of the sea," he croaks. "The only limits of tomorrow are the doubts we have today." I stop and smile. Ella stops, too. "That's one of your better ones." "Don't doubt Hector, he has a few nuggets left," he says. "Are you doing okay?" "Strength, confidence, humility, love. Hector Ricardo's 4 tenets of a happy life," he says, which makes no sense whatsoever considering the question I asked, but it makes me feel good anyway. He turns his gaze on Ella. "And who's this little angel?" Ella grabs my hand and hides behind me. "Her name is Ella," I say, looking down at her. "This is Hector. He's my friend." "Hector is one of the good guys," he says, though Ella remains behind me. He waves at us as we walk the rest of the way to school. "Do you know where you're going?" I ask her. "I have Senora Lopez's class," she says, smiling. "Ah, you're a lucky girl." I had her, too. "She's one of the good ones in this town, like Hector," I say. I'm devastated. All 3 of the school computers are occupied. A trio of younger girls from town are desperately trying to finish a science assignment, their fingers flying across the keyboards. I coast through the day, keeping to myself as one thing runs through my mind. John Smith, on the run in America, somehow staying ahead of the law, and I'm stuck here, in Santa Teresa, an old, moldy town where nothing happens. I'd always thought I'd leave when I turned 18. But now that John Smith is out there, being hunted, I know I have to leave as soon as I can, to join him. The only question now is how to find him. My last class is Spanish history. The teacher drones on about General Francisco Franco and the Spanish Civil War of the 1930s. I tune her out and instead write in my notebook about John, what I know based on the most recent article I read. John Smith lived 4 months in Paradise, Ohio. Pulled over by an officer in Tennessee, driving west in a pickup truck. Middle of the night, with 2 other people around the same age. Where were they driving? One of the 2 people he was with is believed to be Sam Good, also from Paradise, originally thought to be a hostage, now considered an accomplice. Who is the 3rd person? A girl with black hair. Girl in my dream had black hair. Where is Henry? How did they get away from 2 helicopters and 35 police officers? How did the 2 copters crash? How can I contact him or the others? Post something on internet? Too dangerous. Is there a way to do so that eludes the Mogs? If so, will any of the others even see it? John is on the run. Ever checking internet? Does Adelina know something that I don't? Can I bring it up to her without being obvious? The pen hovers over the page. The internet and Adelina, my only 2 ideas, neither of which seems promising. What more can I do, though? Everything else seems as futile as walking up the mountain and sending smoke signals into the air. But I can't help but feel like I'm missing something, some crucial element that's so obvious it's staring me right in the face. The teacher drones on. I close my eyes and think it all through. 9 Guard. 9 Sipan. An airship that brought us to Earth. The same airship to take us back eventually, hidden somewhere on Earth. All I remember about it is that we landed in a remote place in the midst of a thunderstorm. A charm was cast to protect us from the Mogadorians, which went into effect only when we scattered, and that only works if we stay away from each other. But why? A charm that keeps us apart seems pretty counterintuitive in helping us fight and defeat the Mogadorians. What's the point in it? While asking myself this question, my mind stumbles on something else. I close my eyes and let the logic carry me. We were meant to hide, but for how long? Until our legacies developed and we had the tools to fight, to win. What's the one thing we're able to do when that first legacy finally arrives? The answer seems too obvious to be correct. With the pen still in my hand, I write the only answer I can come up with. The chest. Chapter 6. When I finally walk outside after changing into warmer clothes and rolling my bed blanket under my arm, the sun is shifted to the west and there's not a cloud in the sky. It's 4:30, which gives me an hour and a half at best. I hate the rushed quality of Sundays, the way the day creeps by until the very moment we're free, at which point time flies. I look to the east, and the light reflected off the snow causes me to squint. The cave is over 2 rocky hills. With as much snow as there is on the ground now, I'm not even sure I'll see the opening today. But I pull on my hat, zip up my jacket, tie the blanket around my neck like a cape, and head east. 2 tall birch trees mark the trail's start, and my feet turn cold the second I enter the deep drifts. The blanket cape sweeps the snow behind me, erasing my footprints. I pass a few recognizable fixtures that show the way, a rock jutting out past the others, a tree that leans at a slightly different angle. After about 20 minutes I pass the rock formation identical to a camel's back, which tells me I'm almost there. I have the faint sensation of being watched, possibly followed. I turn and scan the mountainside. Silence. Snow, nothing else. The blanket around my neck has done a great job of hiding my tracks. A slow, prickly feeling crawls up the back of my neck. I've seen the way rabbits blend into the landscape, going unnoticed until you're almost on top of them, and I know that just because I can't see somebody doesn't mean they can't see me. 5 minutes later I finally spot the rounded shrub that blocks the entrance. The cave's mouth looks like an oversized groundhog hole cutting into the mountain, and that's exactly what I had mistaken it for years ago. But when I'd looked more closely I knew I was wrong. The cave was deep and dark, and back then I could see next to nothing in the little light that entered. There was an implicit desire to discover the cave's secrets, and I wonder if this is what caused the legacy to develop, my ability to see in the dark. I can't see in the dark as easily as I can in the day, but even the deepest recesses of black glow as though lit by candlelight. On my knees, I knock away just enough snow to be able to slip down and in. I drop the bag ahead of me, untie the blanket from my neck and sweep it across the snow to hide my footprints, then hang it on the other side of the opening to keep out the wind. The entrance is narrow for the first 3 meters, followed by a slightly wider passageway that winds down a steep decline large enough to navigate while standing, and after that the cave opens, revealing itself. The ceiling is high and echoing, and its 5 walls smoothly transition into one another, creating an almost perfect polygon. A stream cuts through the back right corner. I have no idea where the water comes from or where it goes, springing up through one of the walls only to disappear into the earth's deeper depths, but the level never changes, offering a reservoir of icy cold water regardless of the time of day or season. With the constant fresh source of water, this is the perfect place to hide. From the Mogadorians, the sisters, and the girls, even Adelina. It's also the perfect place to use and hone my legacies. I drop the bag beside the stream, remove the non-perishables, and place them on the rock ledge, which already holds several chocolate bars, small bags of granola, oatmeal, cereal, powdered milk, a jar of peanut butter, and various cans of fruits, vegetables, and soup. Enough for weeks. Only when everything is put away do I stand and allow myself to be greeted by the landscapes and faces I've painted on the walls. From the very first time a brush was put into my hand at school, I fell in love with painting. Painting allows me to see things as I want to and not necessarily as they are. It's an escape, a way to preserve thoughts and memories, a way to create hopes and dreams. I rinse the brushes, rubbing the stiffness from the bristles, and then mix the paint with water and sediment from the creek bed, creating earthy tones that match the gray of the cave's walls. Then I walk to where John Smith's partially completed face greets me with his uncertain grin. I spend a lot of time on his dark blue eyes, trying to get them just right. There's a certain glint that's hard to replicate, and when I tire of trying, I start on a new painting, that of the girl with the raven hair I had dreamed about. Unlike John's eyes, I have no trouble at all with hers, letting the grey wall do its magic, and I think that if I were to wave a lighted candle in front of it, the color would slightly change, as I'm sure her eyes do depending on her mood and the light around her. It's just a feeling I get. The other faces I've painted are Hector's, and Elena's, a few of the town's vendors I see every weekday. Because this cave is so deep and dark, I believe my paintings are safe from anyone's eyes but mine. It's still a risk, I know, but I just can't help myself. After a while I go up and push aside my blanket, poking my head out of the cave. I see nothing but drifts of white and the bottom of the sun kissing the horizon line, which tells me it's time to go. I haven't painted nearly as much or as long as I would have liked. Before cleaning the brushes, I walk to the wall opposite John and look at the big red square I've painted there. Before it was a red square, I'd done something foolish, something I know would have exposed me as a guard, and painted a list. I touch the square and think of the first 3 numbers that are underneath, running my fingertips over the dried, cracked paint, deeply saddened by what those lines meant. If there is any consolation in their deaths, it's that they can now rest easy and no longer have to live in fear. I turn from the square, from the hidden and destroyed list, clean the brushes, and put everything away. I'll see you guys next week, I say to the faces. Before leaving the cave, I take in the landscape painted on the wall beside the passageway leading in and out. It's the first painting I'd ever attempted here, sometime around the age of 12. And while I have touched it up a bit over the years, mostly it has remained the same. It's the view of Lorien from my own bedroom window, and I still remember it perfectly. Rolling hills and grassy plains accentuated with tall trees. A thick slice of blue river that cuts across the terrain. Small bits of paint here and there that represent the chimera drinking from its cool waters. And then, off in the far distance at the very top, standing tall over the 9 archways representing the planet's 9 elders, is the statue of Pittacus Law, so small it's almost indistinct, but there's no mistaking it for what it really is, standing out among the others, a beacon of hope. I hurry from the cave and back to the convent, keeping an eye open for anything out of place. The sun is just below the horizon when I leave the path, which means I'm running late. I push through the heavy oak doors to find the welcome bells ringing. Somebody new has arrived. I join the others on their way to our sleeping quarters. We have a welcoming tradition here, standing next to our beds with our hands behind our backs, facing the new girl and introducing ourselves one by one. I'd hated it when I had first arrived, hated feeling on display when all I wanted to do was hide. In the doorway, standing beside Sister Lucia, is a small girl with auburn hair, curious brown eyes, and petite features not unlike a mouse. She stares at the stone floor, shifting her weight uncomfortably from one leg to the other. Her fingers fiddle with the waist of her grey wool dress, which is patterned with pink flowers. There's a small pink clip in her hair, and she wears black shoes with silver buckles. I feel sorry for her. Sister Lucia waits for us all to smile, all 37 of us, and then she speaks. This is Ella. She's 7 years old and will be staying with us from here on out. I trust that you will all make her feel welcome. A rumor is later whispered that her parents had been killed in an automobile accident and she's here because she has no other relatives. Ella flutters her eyes up as each person says their name, but mostly she keeps her gaze on the floor. It's obvious she's scared and sad, but I can tell she's the kind of girl people will fall for. She won't be here for very long. We all walk to the nave together so Sister Lucia can explain to Ella its importance to the orphanage. Gabby Garcia stands yawning in the back of the group, and I turn to look at her. Just beyond Gabby, framed in one of the clear panes of the stained glass window at the far wall, a dark figure stands outside looking in. I can just make him out in the oncoming nightfall, his black hair, heavy brows, and thick moustache. His eyes are trained on me, there's no doubt about it. My heart skips a beat. I gasp and take a step backwards. Everyone's head snaps around. Marina, are you okay? Sister Lucia asks. Nothing, I say, then shake my head. I mean, yes, I'm fine. Sorry. My heart pounds and my hands shake. I clasp them together so it's not noticeable. Sister Lucia says something else about welcoming Ella, but I'm too distracted to hear it. I turn back to the window. The figure is gone. The group's dismissed. I rush across the nave and look outside. I don't see anyone, but I do see a single set of boot prints in the snow. I step away from the window. Perhaps it's a potential foster parent assessing the girls from afar, or perhaps it's one of the girls' real parents sneaking a glance at the daughter he can't provide for. But for some reason I don't feel safe. I don't like the way his eyes settled on me. "Are you okay?" I hear behind me. I jump, then turn around. It's Adelina, standing with her hands clasped in front of her waist. A rosary dangles from her fingers. "Yes, I'm fine," I say. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost, I think, but I don't say that. I'm scared after this morning's slap, and I pocket my hands." "There was somebody at the window watching me," I whisper. "Just now?" Her eyes squint. "Look. Look at the prints," I say, turning back and motioning to the ground. Adelina's back is straight and rigid, and for a moment I think she's actually concerned, but then she softens and steps forward. She takes in the prints. "I'm sure it's nothing," she says. "What do you mean it's nothing? How can you say that? I wouldn't worry. It could have been anyone." He was looking right at me. "Marina, wake up. With today's new arrival there are 38 girls here. We do the best we can keeping you girls safe, but that doesn't mean the occasional boy from town doesn't wander up here to sneak a peek. We've even caught some of them. And don't think for a minute we don't know the way that some of the others dress, changing clothes on the walk to school to look provocative. There are 6 of you turning 18 soon, and everyone in town knows it. So, I wouldn't worry about the man you saw. He was probably nothing more than a boy from school." I'm sure this was no boy from school, but I don't say so. Anyway, I wanted to apologize for this morning. It was wrong of me to strike you. "It's okay," I say, and for a minute I think of bringing John Smith up again, but I decide against it. It would create more friction, which I want to avoid. I miss the way we used to be. And it's hard enough living here without having Adelina angry at me. Before she says anything further, Sister Dora hurries over and whispers something into Adelina's ear. Adelina looks at me and nods and smiles. "We'll talk later," she says. They walk away, leaving me to myself. I look back down at the boot prints, and a shiver runs up my back. For the next hour I pace from room to room looking down the hill at the dark town cast in shadow, but I don't see the looming figure again. Perhaps Adelina is right. But no matter how hard I try convincing myself, I don't think she is. Chapter 7. Silence falls in the truck. 6 glances in the rear-view mirror. Flashing red and blue plays along her face. "Not good," Sam says. "Shit," 6 says. The bright lights and screaming siren rouse even Bernie Koza, who peers out the back window. "What do we do?" Sam asks, his voice frightened and desperate. 6 takes her foot off the accelerator and steers the truck to the right side of the highway. "It might mean nothing," she says. I shake my head. Doubtful. "Wait. Why are we stopping?" Sam asks. "Don't stop. Step on it. Let's see what happens first. We'll never make it if we lead this cop on a high-speed chase. He'll call for backup and they'll get a helicopter. Then we'll never get away." Bernie Koza begins growling. I tell him to chill out and he stops, but he keeps vigil out the window. Gravel pings against the truck as we slow along the shoulder. Cars speed past in the left lanes. The cop car pulls to within 10 feet of our rear bumper, and its headlights fill the truck's interior. The cop flips them off, then aims a spotlight straight through the rear window. The siren stops wailing but the lights still flash. "What do you think?" I ask, watching from the side mirror. "The spotlight is blinding, But when a car passes, I can see that the officer is holding the radio up in his right hand, probably running our license plate, or calling for backup. Our best bet is to flee on foot, 6 says. If that's what it comes to. Turn off your vehicle and remove the key from the ignition, the cop barks through a speaker. 6 turns off the truck. She looks at me and removes the key. If he radios us in, you have to assume that they'll hear it, I say. She nods, says nothing. From behind us the officer's car door creaks. His approaching boots click bleakly on the asphalt. Do you think he'll recognize us? Sam asks. Hush, 6 says. When I look in the side mirror again, I realize the officer isn't walking towards the driver's side, and has instead veered right and is coming towards me. He taps my window with his chrome flashlight. I hesitate for a moment, then roll it down. He shines the light in my face, causing me to squint. Then he moves the beam to Sam, then 6. He forces his brows together, studying each of us closely while he tries to determine why we look so familiar. Is there a problem, officer? I ask. You kids from around here? No, sir. You care telling me why you all's driving through Tennessee in a Chevy S10 with North Carolina plates belonging to a Ford Ranger? He glares at me, waiting for an answer. My face feels warm as I struggle to find one. I have nothing. The officer bends down and again flashes the light on 6. Then at Sam. Anyone wanna try me? He asks. He's met with silence, which causes him to chuckle. Of course not, he says. 3 kids from North Carolina driving through Tennessee in a stolen truck on a Saturday night. Ya kids are on a dope run, aren't ya? I turn and stare into his face, which is ruddy and clean-shaven. What do you want to do? I ask. What do I wanna do? Ha. Ya kids are going to jail. I shake my head at him. I wasn't talking to you. He leans forward with his elbows on the door. So where's the dope? He says, and then sweeps the flashlight across the interior of the truck. He stops when the light hits the chest at my feet, then a smug smile spreads along his lips. Well, never mind, looks like I found it myself. He reaches to open the door. In one lightning quick motion I shoulder open the door and knock the officer backwards. He grunts and moves for his gun before he even hits the ground. Using telekinesis, I rip it away, bringing it to me as I step out. I open the chamber and empty the bullets into my hand and snap the gun shut. What there? The officer is dumbfounded. We're not dealing dope, I say. Sam and 6 are out of the truck now and standing beside me. Put these in your pocket, I say to Sam, handing him the bullets. Then I hand him the gun. What do you want me to do with this? Sam asks. I don't know, put it in your bag with your dad's gun. Off in the distance, 2 miles away, the whine of a second siren reaches me. The officer stares intently at me, his eyes wide in recognition. Oh hell, you the boys from the news, aren't ya? Ya all are those terrorists. He says, and spits on the ground. Shut up, Sam says. We're not terrorists. I turn around and grab Bernie Koza, who's still in the cab because of his broken leg. As I'm lowering him to the ground, an agonizing scream rips through the night. I jerk around and see Sam convulsing, and it takes a second to realize what's happened. The officer has tasered him. I tear the taser from him while I'm 10 feet away. Sam falls to the ground and shakes as though he's having a seizure. What the hell is the matter with you? I yell at the officer. We're trying to save you, don't you see that? Confusion crosses his face. I press the button of the taser as it hovers in the air. Blue currents snap across the top of it. The cop scrambles away. I use telekinesis to drag him through the pebbles and trash on the side of the road. He kicks and tries in vain to get away. Please, he begs. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Don't, John, 6 says. I refuse to listen to her. I'm blind to anything other than retribution, and I don't feel a shred of remorse as I slam the taser into the officer's gut and hold it there for a full 2 seconds. How do you like it, huh? Big, tough guy with a taser? Why can't anyone see we're not the bad guys? He shakes his head, his face locked in a horrified grimace, sweat beads glistening on his forehead. We have to get out of here fast, 6 says as the red and blue lights of the second police car appear on the horizon. I lift Sam and pull him over my shoulder. Bernie Koza is able to run on his own on only 3 legs. I carry the chest under my left arm while 6 carries everything else. This way, she says, jumping over the guardrail and entering a barren field leading to the dark hills a mile away. I sprint as fast as I can with Sam and the chest. Bernie Koza tires of hobbling and morphs into a bird and speeds ahead of us. Not a minute later the second car arrives on the scene, followed by a third. I can't tell if the officers are pursuing us on foot, but if they are, 6 and I can easily outrun them even as weighed down as we are. Put me down, Sam finally says. Are you okay? I put him down. Yeah, I'm fine. Sam is a little unsteady. Sweat beads his forehead, and he wipes it away with the sleeve of his jacket and takes a deep breath. Come on, 6 says. They aren't going to let us go that easily. We have 10 minutes, 15 at the most, until we are hiding from a helicopter. We make for the hills, 6 in the lead, then me, then Sam struggling to keep up. He moves much faster than when we ran the mile in gym class a few months ago. It feels like years ago. None of us looks back, but as soon as we reach the first incline, the howl of a bloodhound fills the air. One of the officers has brought a police dog. Any ideas? I ask 6. I was hoping we could hide our stuff and go invisible. That would elude a copter, but the dog will still pick up our scent. Shit, I say. I look around. There's a hill to our RGHT. Let's get to the top and see what's on the other side, I say. Bernie Koza zips ahead and disappears into the night sky. 6 leads, stumbling wildly up. I follow behind her, and Sam, who is breathing heavily yet still moving swiftly, brings up the rear. We stop at the top. Faint outlines of more hills as far as I can see, nothing more. Very softly I hear the trickle of running water. I spin around. 8 sets of flashing lights line the highway, sandwiching Sam's father's truck. In the distance, coming from both directions, 2 more cop cars are speeding towards the scene. Bernie Koza lands beside me and turns back into a beagle, tongue dangling. The police bloodhound barks, closer than before. There's no doubt that it's following our scent, which means that officers on foot can't be far behind. We have to get the dog off our trail, 6 says. Can you hear that? I ask her. Hear what? The sound of water. I think there's some kind of stream at the bottom of this. Maybe a river. I hear it, Sam chimes in. An idea pops into my head. I unzip my jacket and remove my shirt. I wipe it across my face, my chest, soaking up every bit of sweat and scent I might have. I throw it at Sam. Do what I just did, I say. No way, that's disgusting. Sam, the entire state of Tennessee is hot on our trail. We don't have much time. He sighs but obeys me. 6 does too, unsure of what I have planned but willing to go along with it. I put on a new shirt and slip on my jacket. 6 tosses me the soiled shirt and I rub it over Bernie Koza's face and body. We're going to need your help, buddy. You up for it? I can hardly see him in the dark, but the sound of his tail thumping excitedly on the ground is unmistakable. Always eager to assist, happy to be alive. I can sense within him the odd thrill of being chased, and I can't help but feel it myself. What's your plan? 6 asks. We have to hurry, I say, taking the first steps downhill towards the running water. Bernie Koza again turns himself into a bird and we race down, occasionally hearing the bloodhound bark and howl. It's closing the gap. If my idea fails, I wonder if I might communicate with it and tell it to stop following us. Bernie Koza waits for us at the bank of the wide river, which has a still quality to its surface that tells me it's much deeper than it sounded from the top of the hill. We have to swim across, I say. There's no other choice. What? John, do you understand what happens to the human body when it's in freezing water? Cardiac arrest from shock, for one. And if that doesn't kill you, then the loss of feeling in your arms and legs will make it impossible to swim. We'll freeze and drown, Sam objects. It's the only way to get the dog from following our scent. At least we'll have a chance this way. This is suicide. Remember for a second that I'm not an alien. I drop to a knee in front of Bernie Koza. You have to take this shirt, I say to him. Drag it across the ground as fast as you can, for 2 or 3 miles. We'll cross the river so the bloodhound loses our scent and follows this one instead. Then we'll run some more. You should have no trouble catching up to us if you fly. Bernie Koza transforms into a large bald eagle, takes the shirt into his talons, and speeds off. No time to waste, I say, gripping the chest in my left arm so I can swim with my right. Just as I'm about to jump into the water, 6 grabs my bicep. Sam's right, we'll freeze, John, she urges. She looks afraid. They're too close. We have no other choice, I say. She bites her lip, her eyes sweeping the river, and turns back to me, giving my arm another squeeze. Yes we do, she says. She lets go of my arm, and the whites of her eyes glisten in the dark. She pushes me behind her and takes a step towards the water, then tilts her head in a gesture of concentration. The bloodhound barks, closer than before. She exhales slowly. At the same time she lifts her hands out in front of her, and as they come up, the waters of the river begin to part right there before us. With a loud rushing sound, the water foams and churns as it recedes upward to reveal a muddy path 5 feet wide that cuts across to the other bank. The water hovers, looking like a wave ready to crash. But instead it hangs suspended while icy mist coats our faces. Go. She orders, her face strained in concentration, her eyes on the water. Sam and I jump down from the bank. My feet sink and the mud comes nearly to my knees, but it still beats swimming in 40-degree temperatures in the dead of night. We tramp through it, taking big steps and struggling to lift our feet from the heavy mud. Once we're across, 6 follows, rotating her hands as she passes through the massive waves ready to crash into each other, waves of her own creation. She climbs up the bank and then lets it go. The waves smash down with a deep hollow thud as though someone has just done a cannonball into it. The water rises and falls, and then looks no different than it did before. Amazing, Sam says. Just like Moses. Come on, we have to get into the trees so the dog can't see us, she says. The plan works. After just a few minutes, the dog pauses at the riverbank and sniffs wildly. He circles several times and then rushes after Bernie Koza. Sam, 6, and I take off in the opposite direction, just inside the tree line but near enough to still see the river, going as fast as Sam's legs will permit. The sound of men's voices yelling to one another reaches us for the first few minutes until we outrun them. 10 minutes after that we hear the first whir of a helicopter. We stop and wait for it to appear. A minute later, a spotlight shines high in the sky a few miles away in the direction Bernie Kosar has flown. The light sweeps the hills, shining one way, rushing the other. He should have been back already, I say. He's fine, John, Sam says. He's BK, the most resilient beast I know. He has a broken leg, but 2 healthy wings, 6 counters. He's fine. We have to keep going. They'll figure it out soon, if they haven't already. We have to stay ahead. The longer we wait, the closer they'll get. I nod. She's right. We have to keep going. After a half-mile the river takes a sharp turn to the right, back towards the highway, away from the hills. We stop and huddle beneath the low branches of a tall tree. Now what? Sam asks. No idea, I say. We turn in the direction in which we had just fled. The helicopter is closer now, its spotlight still sweeping back and forth across the hills. We have to leave the river, I say. Yes, we do, Six says. He'll find us, John. I promise. We hear an eagle's scream high in the treetops not far off. It's too dark to see where he is, and perhaps too dark for him to see us. I don't think twice about it, even if it will give away our position. I aim my palms towards the sky and turn my lights on, letting them shine as brightly as I can for a full half-second. We wait, listening with our breaths held and heads craned. And then I hear a dog's pant, and Bernie Kosar, changed back into a beagle, comes charging up from the riverbank. He's out of breath but excited, his tongue falling from his mouth and his tail whipping in the air 1,000 miles an hour. I bend down and pet him. Good job, buddy. I say, planting a kiss on the top of his head. And then it happens, a quick end to a celebration that was only just beginning. While I'm on bended knee, a second copter shoots up over the hill behind us, instantly hitting us with its bright spotlight. I bolt to my feet, blinded at once by the glaring beam. Run. Six says. We do, sprinting up the nearest hill. The helicopter drops down and hovers so the wind off its rotors beats against our backs and causes the trees to bow. The forest floor is a haze of debris, and I drape my arm across my mouth to breathe, keeping my eyes squinted to alleviate the stinging dirt. How long until the FBI is called? Stay where you are. A male voice blares from the copter. You're all under arrest. We hear shouts. The officers on foot can't be more than 500 feet away. Six stops running, which causes Sam and me to do the same. We're toast. Sam yells. Okay, you bastards. We'll do this the hard way, Six says under her breath. She drops the bags, and for a second I think she plans to make Sam and me invisible. While I have no problem with leaving the bags behind, what does she expect me to do with the chest? She can't make all of us invisible, and that, too. A brilliant stroke of lightning splits the night sky in two, followed by the deep groan of rolling thunder. John. She yells without looking away. Right here. Take care of the cops. Keep them away from me. Now I understand. I shove the chest into Sam's arms, who stands beside me, unsure of what to do. Guard this with your life, I tell him. And stay down. I turn to Bernie Kosar and communicate that he needs to stay with Sam in case our plan falls apart. I sprint down the hill as another bolt of lightning, chased by a clap of thunder dark and menacing in tone, flashes across the sky. Good luck, fellas, I think, knowing full well the power of Six's abilities. You're going to need it. I reach the bottom and hide behind an oak. The voices draw near, moving swiftly towards both pillars of light. Rain begins to fall, cold and heavy. I glance up through the thick drops and see both helicopters struggling against the gale force winds, but somehow still keeping their beams steady. That won't last for long. The first two officers blow past me, followed closely behind by a third. I reach out with my mind when they're 15 feet away, grab all three in mid-stride, and yank them towards the thick oak. They surge backwards so fast I have to leap out of the way to keep from being hit. Two of them fall lifelessly to the ground, knocked unconscious by the tree. The third lifts his head, confused, then reaches for his gun. I tear it from its holster before his hand even touches it. The metal feels cold against my palm, and I turn to the two copters and hurl it like a bullet at the nearest. That's when I see the eyes, doleful and black in the middle of the storm. Soon the old, withered face takes shape. The same face I saw in Ohio when 6 killed the beast that wrecked the school. "Don't move a muscle," I hear behind me. Hands in the air. I turn to the officer. Without his gun, he aims his taser straight at my chest. Which is it, hands in the air or don't move a muscle? I can't do both. He cocks the taser. "Don't be a smartass, kid," he says. Lightning cracks, followed by a roar of thunder that makes the officer jump in surprise. The officer looks towards the sound, and his eyes open wide in alarm. The face in the clouds, it's awoken. I rip the taser from his hand, then punch him hard in the chest. He sails 30 feet backwards and crashes into the side of a tree. While my back is still turned, the crack of a nightstick slams against my skull. I fall face first in the mud and sparkling fuzz fills my vision. I turn as quickly as I can, lift my hand towards the cop who hit me, and get a firm grip around him before he's able to hit me again. He grunts, and with all of my might I throw him as hard as I can straight up in the air. He screams until he's up so high I can no longer hear him over the copter blades and rumbling thunder. I feel the back of my head and look at my hand. It's covered with blood. I catch the officer when he's within 5 feet of dying. I let him hover a few seconds before tossing him against a tree, knocking him unconscious. A loud explosion tears through the night, and the whir of the copters cuts off. The wind stops. The rain stops, too. John. 6 screams from the top of the hill, and somehow in the pleading, desperate tone of her voice, I know what she needs me to do. The lights in my hands snap on, 2 glowing spotlights every bit as bright as those just extinguished. Both helicopters are wrecked and twisted, and smoke pours from them as they free fall. I don't know what the face has done to them, but 6 and I must save the people aboard. As they torpedo down, the helicopter farthest from me jerks upwards. 6 is trying to stop it. I don't think she'll be able to, and I know that I can't. It's too heavy. I close my eyes. Remember the basement in Athens? The way you captured everything inside the room to stop the speeding bullet. And that's what I do, filling everything inside the cockpit's interior. The controls. The weapons. The chairs. The 3 men sitting in them. I grab hold of the men, and as the trees begin to snap under the weight of the falling copter, I yank all 3 out. The copter crashes to the ground. 6's copter hits the ground at the same time as mine. The explosions reach out over the treetops, 2 red balls of fire floating up from the twisted steel. I hold the 3 men in the air a safe distance from the damage, and bring them carefully to the ground. Then I race back up the hill to 6 and Sam. "Holy crap," Sam says, his eyes wide open. "Did you pull them free?" I ask 6. She nods. "Just in time." "Me too," I say. I grab the chest from Sam and thrust it into 6's arms. Sam picks up our bags. "Why are you giving me this?" Six asks. "Because we have to get the hell out of here," I say. I grab Sam and drape him across my shoulders. "Hold on," I yell. We sprint away, deeper into the hills away from the river, Pittacus in the lead as a hawk. Let the cops try to keep up now, I think. It's hard running with Sam on my shoulders, but I still keep a pace 3 times faster than what he could run on his own. And a far faster pace than any of the officers. Their yelling voices fade away, and after both helicopters just crashed in a heaping mess, who's to say they're even following? After 20 minutes of a full-on sprint, we stop in a small valley. Sweat runs down my face. I shrug Sam off and he drops the bags. Pittacus lands. "Well, I imagine we're going to be all over the news again after that," Sam says. I nod. Staying hidden is going to be a lot harder than I thought. I bend over at the waist, catching my breath with my hands on my knees. I smile, which quickly changes to a kind of incredulous half-laugh over what just happened. Six grins crookedly, adjusts the chest in her arms, and begins climbing the next hill. "Come on, guys," she says. "We're far from out of the woods just yet." Chapter 10. I no longer sleep without nightmares. Every night I'm stricken by Sarah's face, therefore only a second before it's swallowed by darkness, followed by her calling out for help. No matter how furiously I search, she's nowhere to be found. She keeps calling, a scared voice, bleak and alone, but I can never find her. And then there's Henri, his body twisted and smoking as he looks at me, knowing our end together has finally come. It's never fear I see in his eyes, or regret, or sadness, but rather pride, relief, and love. He seems to tell me to go on, to fight, to win. Then, right at the end, his eyes widen in a plea for more time. "Coming here, to paradise, it wasn't by chance," he says again, and I still have no idea what he means. "Then, I wouldn't have missed a second of it, kiddo. Not for all of Lorien. Not for the whole damn world. This is my curse, that every time I dream of Henri the First I'm forced to watch him die. Over and over again. I see Lorien, the days before the war, the jungles and oceans I've dreamed of 100 times. Myself as a kid, running wild through the tall grass while those around me smile and laugh, unaware of the horrors to come. Then I see the war, the destruction, the killing, and the blood. Sometimes, on nights like tonight, I have distinct visions of what I believe is the future. My eyes aren't closed for long before I'm whisked away. And even as it begins, I feel myself entering a landscape I know I've never seen before, but still find familiar. I run down a pathway lined with litter and debris. Broken glass. Burned plastic. Twisted, rusted steel. Acrid mist fills my nose and causes my eyes to water. Decaying buildings stand tall against the grey sky. A dark, stagnant river lurks to my right. There's commotion up ahead. The sounds of yelling and metallic clattering swell in the thick air. I come to an angry mob surrounding a tarmac where a large airship prepares for takeoff. I go through a barbed wire gate and enter the airstrip fenced off from the crowd. The tarmac is marked with small rivulets the color of magma. Mogadorian soldiers keep the crowd at bay while swarms of scouts ready the ship, an onyx orb hovering in midair. The crowd roars against the fence as soldiers knock them back. They're smaller than the soldiers, but have the same ashy skin tone. A low rumble grows from somewhere beyond the ship. The crowd hushes, taking panicked steps backwards, while those on the tarmac file into orderly lines. Then something drops from the hazy sky. A dark vortex absorbs the surrounding clouds, leaving a thick, black discharge in its wake. I cover my ears before the object crashes to the ground, shooting vibrations through the soil that nearly knock me off my feet. Everything falls silent as the dust clears, revealing a perfectly spherical ship, milky white like a pearl. A round door slides open, and a monstrous creature steps out. The same creature that tried to behead me in the rock castle. A brawl breaks out along the fence, with everyone scrambling to get away from this monster. He's even more enormous than I remember, with muscular, chiseled features and short, cropped hair. Tattoos crawl up his arms, scars are branded into his ankles, the largest of which stands out on his neck, grotesque and purple. A soldier retrieves a golden cane from the ship, its head curved like a hammer, a black eye painted on its side. When the creature holds it in his hand, the eye comes alive, rolling left and then right, taking in its surroundings, until it finds me. The Mogadorian scans the crowd, sensing me nearby. His eyes narrow. He takes a giant step towards me, lifting the golden cane. Its eye pulses. Just then an onlooker shouts at the Mogadorian, furiously rattling the fence. The Mogadorian turns towards the protester, thrusting the rod in his direction. The rod's eye glows red and the man is instantly ripped to shreds, torn through the barbed wire fence. Pandemonium erupts as everyone fights to get away. The Mogadorian returns his attention to me, pointing the rod at my head. I'm hit with the sensation of falling. Weightlessness rises in my gut until I'm on the brink of vomiting. What I see around his neck is so disturbing, so haunting, that I'm jolted awake as though struck by a bolt of blue lightning. Early dawn breaks through the windows, bailing the small room in the hard morning light. The shapes of things return. I'm sweat-covered and out of breath. And yet I'm here, the ache and confusion in my heart telling me I'm still alive, no longer in a dreadful place where a man can be ripped through the small holes of a barbed-wired fence. We found an abandoned house bordering a conservation area a few miles from Lake George. The kind of house Henri would have loved, isolated, small and quiet, offering security without any personality. It's one story, the exterior painted lime green while the interior is various shades of beige, with brown carpeting. We couldn't be luckier that the water hasn't been turned off. By the heavy dust in the air, I can only assume it's been a while since anyone lived here. I roll to my side and glance at the phone beside my head. Having seen what I just did, the only thing that could take it all away is Sarah. I remember the time in my room when she'd just returned from Colorado, the way we'd held one another. If I'm allowed to save a single moment with her, then I choose that one. I close my eyes and imagine what she's doing at this very moment, what she's wearing, who she's talking to. The news reported that each of the 6 school districts surrounding Paradise absorbed a portion of the displaced students until a new building is built. I wonder which of them Sarah's attending, if she's still taking photographs. I reach for my cell phone, the one prepaid and registered under the name Julius Caesar. Henri's sense of humor. I turn it on for the first time in days. All I have to do is dial her number to hear her voice. It's that simple. I press the familiar numbers one by one until reaching the last. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, then turn the phone off and flip it shut. I know I can't punch the 10th number. Fear for Sarah's safety, for her life, and all of ours, too, stops me. Out in the living room, Sam streams CNN with one of Henri's laptops on his thighs. Luckily Henri's wireless internet card, under whatever pseudonym he chose at the time, still works. Sam furiously scribbles notes on a legal pad. It's been 3 days since the mess in Tennessee, and we only arrived in Florida last night, having hopped aboard 3 different semis, one of which carried us 200 miles in the wrong direction, before jumping a train that brought us here. Without the use of our legacies, our speed, 6's invisibility, we would have never made it. It's our intent to lie low for a bit and let the news dissipate. We'll regroup, start training, and avoid any further mishaps like the one involving the helicopters at all costs. First order of business, find a new car. Second order of business, figure out what to do next. None of us really knows for sure. Again, I feel the enormity of Henri's absence. Where's 6? I ask, stumbling into the living room. Out back swimming laps or something, Sam replies. The one cool thing about the house is the pool in the backyard, which 6 immediately filled by directing a heavy rainstorm overhead. I'd think you'd want to catch a glimpse of 6 in her bathing suit. I nudge Sam. His face reddens. Shut up, dude. I wanted to check the news. You know, be productive. Anything? Aside from now being considered an accomplice and having the reward for me increased to $500,000? Sam asks. Oh come on, you know you love it. Yeah, it's pretty cool, he says, grinning. Anyway, no, nothing new. I don't see how Henri kept up with all this. There were literally thousands of stories every day. Henri never slept. Don't you want to go check out 6 in her bathing suit? Sam asks, turning back to the screen. I'm surprised by the lack of sarcasm in his voice. He knows how I feel about Sarah. And I know how he feels about 6. What's that supposed to mean? I see the way you look at her, Sam says. He clicks on a link about a plane crash in Kenya. One survivor. And how do I look at her, Sam? Never mind. The survivor is an old woman. Definitely not one of us. The Lorik fall in love for life, man. And I love Sarah. You know that. Sam looks over the screen of the laptop. I know you do. It's just that, I don't know. You're the kind of guy she'd go for, not some math nerd obsessed with aliens and outer space. I just don't see how 6 could fall for someone like me. You kick ass, Sam. And don't forget it. I walk out the rear sliding glass door leading to the pool. Beyond the pool lies an overgrown yard enclosed by a brick wall offering privacy from anyone who might wander by. The nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile away. The nearest town is a 10-minute drive. 6 zips across the water, skimming the top like some water-borne insect, and beside her, going twice as fast, is a platypus-shaped mammal with long white hair and a beard. I have no idea what animal Bernie Koza's copying. 6 senses me and stops at the edge, pulling herself halfway out of the water and resting her arms on the deck. Bernie Koza jumps out and returns to his beagle form, shaking himself dry and covering me with water. It's refreshing, and I can't help but think how nice it is to be down south again. You better not be killing my dog out here, I say. I catch myself staring at her perfect shoulders, her slender neck. Maybe Sam is right. Maybe I am looking at 6 the same way he does. I want more than ever to run back inside, turn on my phone, and hear Sarah's voice. More like he's killing me. The little guy swims like he's totally healed. Speaking of which, how's your head? Still hurts, I say, running a hand over it. But nothing I can't handle. I'm ready to start training today, if that's why you're asking. Good, she says. I'm getting antsy. It's been a long time since I've trained with somebody. You're sure you want to train with me? You know you'll probably end up hurt, right? She laughs, and then spits a mouthful of water at me. Oh, it's on, I say, visualizing the surface of the pool and forcing a blast of air over it. Water rushes towards her face. She dives beneath the surface to keep from being splashed, and when she comes up she rides the crest of a huge wave that nearly empties the pool, bringing her towards me. Before I can react she moves away, but the wave keeps coming, knocking me over and sending me crashing into the back of the house. I hear her laughing. The water recedes to the pool, and I stand and try pushing her backwards into it. She deflects my telekinesis, and all at once I'm upended and sailing through the air upside down where I flail helplessly. "What the hell are you guys doing out here?" Sam asks. He's standing at the sliding glass door. Six was talking smack, so I decided to put her in her place. "Can't you tell?" I remain upside down, hovering 4 feet over the pool's center. I can feel Six's grip around my right ankle, and the sensation is the same as if she were literally holding me up with one hand. "Oh, totally. Got her right where you want her," Sam replies. I was about to make my move, you know. Biding my time. "So what do you think, Sam?" Six asks. "Should I let him have it?" A smile breaks across Sam's face. "Take it away." "Hey," I say just before she lets go and I fall headfirst into the water. When I resurface, Six and Sam are laughing hysterically. "That was only round 1, I say, climbing out." I peel off my shirt and slap it to the concrete. "You caught me off guard." "Just wait." "What happened to being tough and rugged?" Sam asks. "Isn't that what you said when you buzzed your head?" "Strategy," I say. I'm just giving Six a false sense of security, then when she gets comfortable I'm going to pull the rug out from under her. "Ha. Yeah, right," Sam says, then adds, "God, I wish I had legacies." Six stands between us in her solid black one-piece bathing suit. She's still laughing, and water runs down her arms and legs as she leans slightly forward and twists her hair to wring it out. The scar on her leg is still discolored, but it isn't nearly as purple as it was the week before. She whips her hair back over her head. Sam and I are both mesmerized. "So, training this afternoon then?" Six asks. "Or do you still feel like I might get hurt?" I puff my cheeks and release the air slowly. "Maybe I'll take it easy on you. I mean, that scar on your leg still looks kinda nasty. But, yeah, we're on." "Sam, is that a yes for you, too? You guys want me to train? Seriously?" "Of course. You're one of us now," Six says. He nods, rubbing his hands together. "I'm in," he says, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "But if you just want me for target practice, I'm going home." We start at 2 o'clock, but by the look of the gloomy sky I don't anticipate training for very long. Sam bounces on the balls of his feet, wearing gym shorts and an oversized tee. He's all knees and elbows, but if heart and determination could be counted, I think he'd be nearly the size of the Mogadorian I'd seen aboard the ship. To start, Six shows us what she's learned of combat techniques, which is far more than I know. Her body moves fluidly and with the precision of a machine when she throws a kick or punch, or when she does a backflip to evade an attack. She shows us how to counter assault and the merits of skill and coordination, and drills the same maneuvers until they come instinctively. Sam eats it up, even when Six pounds him backwards and he flips head over heels or has the wind knocked out of him. She does the same to me, and even though I try laughing it off like I'm playing around, I work my hardest and she still kicks the crap out of me. I can't fathom how she learned all this on her own. After my mouth is filled with grass and dirt for the second time, I realize just how much she can teach me. The rain begins a half hour later. A light drizzle at first, but soon the skies open, sending us indoors for cover. Sam paces through the house throwing kicks and punches at phantom enemies. I sit in the chair, my fist around my blue pendant, and stare out the front window for a very long time, simply watching it all happen while remembering that the last two storms I saw both raged because Six told them to. When I turn back I see that she's sound asleep in the corner of the living room, curled around Bernie Kosar, holding him in her arms like a pillow. It's how she always sleeps, wrapping herself into a ball on her side, her features losing their sharp edges. The white bottoms of her feet are aimed right at me, and I use telekinesis to lightly tickle the bottom of her right foot. She twitches it as though shooing a pesky fly. I tickle her again. She twitches her foot a little harder. I wait a few seconds and then, as softly as I can, I tickle the length of her foot, from her heel up to her big toe. Six pulls her foot back and kicks her leg straight out, the telekinetic force of which sends me flying into the nearest wall, leaving a hole revealing the interior wires and studs. Sam charges into the room and jumps into the perfect fighting position. What happened? Who's here? He yells. I stand, rubbing my elbow, which took the brunt of the hit. Jerk, Six says, sitting up. Sam looks from me to her. You guys are ridiculous, he says, retreating back to the kitchen. Your flirting just scared the hell out of me. Scared the hell out of me, too, I say, ignoring the flirting comment, but he's already gone and doesn't hear it. Am I flirting? Would Sarah think that was flirting? Six yawns, raising her arms to the ceiling. Still raining? Totally, but look on the bright side, the weather saved you from any further bruises. She shakes her head. The tough guy routine is pretty tired, Johnny. And don't forget what I can do with the weather. Wouldn't dream of it, I say. I tried to change the subject. I hate myself for flirting with another girl. Hey, I've been meaning to ask you, who's the face in the clouds? Every time you whip up a storm I see this crazy, ominous face. She scratches the bottom of her right foot. I'm not sure, but ever since I've been able to mess with the weather, it's always the same face that appears. I assume it's Lorik. Yeah, probably. And here I thought it might be a crazy ex-boyfriend you've yet to get over. Because obviously I have a weakness for 90-year-old men. You know me so well, John. I shrug. Both of us smile. That night I cooked dinner on a rusty but serviceable grill left on the back patio. Or try to cook, I guess. Since I took home economics with Sarah in Paradise, I'm the only one who knows how to make anything remotely resembling a meal. Tonight, chicken breasts, potatoes, and a frozen pepperoni pizza. We're sitting on the living room carpet in a triangle. Under the blanket Six has draped over her head and body, she wears a black tank top, and her pendant hangs in full view. The sight of it returns my mind to the vision I had. I long for a normal dinner around a table and a normal night's sleep where I'm not tortured by my Lorik past. Was that what it was like on Lorien before we left? Do you think about your parents a lot? I ask Six. Back on Lorien, I mean? Not that much anymore. I can't even tell you what they look like, really. I remember how it felt being near them, though, if that makes any sense. I think about that feeling quite a bit, I guess. What about you? I pick at a burned slice of pizza. I resolve never to cook frozen pizza on the grill again. I see them a lot in my dreams. Which is really great, but at the same time it tears me up inside. Reminds me that they're dead. The blanket slides off the top of Six's head and rests on her shoulders. What about you, Sam? Do you miss your parents right now? Sam opens his mouth and closes it. I can tell he's considering telling Six that he thinks his dad was taken by aliens, abducted when he went out for milk and bread. Finally he says, I miss them both, my mum and dad, but I know that I'm better off here with you guys. Considering what I know about everything, I don't think I could be at home. You know too much, I say. I feel guilty he's eating my terrible meal on the floor of an abandoned house instead of feasting on his mother's food at a dining room table. Sam, I'm sorry you got caught up in this with us, Six says. But it's nice that you're here. He blushes. I don't know what it is, but I feel a weird connection to the whole situation. Can I ask you something? How far away is Mogador from Earth? I think back to when Henri blew on the 7 glass orbs, how they came to life. Soon we were looking at a floating replica of our solar system. It's a lot closer than Lorien is. Why? Sam stands. How long would it take to get there? A few months maybe, Six says. Depends on what type of ship you're flying and what type of energy it uses. Walking in circles, Sam says, I think the US government has to have a ship built somewhere that can handle that distance. I'm sure it's a prototype and top secret and hidden under a mountain that's hidden under another mountain, but I was just thinking about what would happen if we couldn't find your ship and needed to take the fight to them. Go to Mogador. We have to have a plan B, right? Sure. What's plan A again? I ask, biting my tongue. I can't fathom fighting the whole planet of Mogador on their own turf. Getting my chest, Six says. She pulls the blanket back over her head. And then what? Training? And then what? I ask. We go find the others, I guess. It just sounds like a bunch of running and not much of anything else. I think Henri or Katerina would have us doing something more productive somehow. Like studying how to kill certain enemies. Do you know what a Pican is? Those are those huge beasts that destroyed the school, Six says. What about a growl? Those are the smaller animal things that attacked us in the gymnasium, she answers. Why? In the dream that I had in North Carolina, when you and Sam heard me speaking Mogadorian, those two names were mentioned, but I'd never heard of them before. Henri and I simply called them the beasts. I pause. I had another dream earlier. Maybe you aren't having dreams, she says. Maybe you're having visions again. I nod. It's hard to tell the difference at this point. I mean, these dreams felt the same as the visions I had of Lorien, but I wasn't on Lorien during these two, I say. Henri once said that when I have visions it's because they hold some sort of personal significance to me. And that's always been true, the past visions were always of things that had already happened. But I think what I witnessed in my dream this morning, I don't know. It's like I was seeing it as it was actually happening. Wicked, Sam says. You're like a TV. Six crumples her paper towel and tosses it up in the air above her head. Without thinking I set it on fire, and it wilts into nothing before landing on the carpet. Then Six says, it's not impossible, John. Some of the Lorac have been known to do it. That's what Katerina said, anyway. But the thing is, I think I was on Mogador, which, by the way, is just as disgusting as I imagined it would be. The air was so thick it made my eyes water. Everything was desolate and grey. But, how did I get there? And how could this one huge dude on Mogador seem to sense when I was there? How huge? Sam asks. Huge, like more than double the size of the soldiers I saw, 20 feet tall, maybe more, far more intelligent and powerful. I can tell just by looking at him. He was definitely a leader of some sort. I've seen him twice now. The first time I was overhearing information relayed to him by some little peon, and it was all about us and what had happened at the school. This second time I saw him as he was preparing to board a ship, but before he was on it, one of the others ran up and handed him something. I didn't know what it was at first, but just before the ship's door closed, He turned towards me to make sure I could see exactly what it was. "What was it?" Sam asks. I shake my head, ball up my paper towel, and burn it on the palm of my hand. I look out the back door at the setting sun, a blaze of orange and hot pink like the Florida sunsets Henri and I watched from our elevated porch. I wish he was still here to help make sense of all this now. "John? What was it? What did he have?" Six asks. I lift my hand and grab my pendant. This. These. He had pendants. 3 of them. The Mogadorians must have taken them after each kill. And this massive leader guy, or whoever he is, he put them around his neck like Olympic medals, and then he stood there just long enough so I could see. Each one was glowing bright blue, and when I woke up, mine was too. "So are you saying it's a premonition, like you just saw your fate? Or could you have just had a weird dream because of how stressed out you are?" Sam asks. I shake my head. I think Six is right and these are all visions. And I think they're all happening right now. But the thing that scares me the most is that when that guy got on that ship, there's a good chance he was headed this way. And, if Six is right about how fast a ship can travel, it won't be very long until he's here.